Welcome to Mr. Horror Stories, and these are 10 scary true small-town horror stories. I visited the town of Whitlow, Nebraska, in the fall of 2019. It was for a personal project, rural architecture photography, mostly. I was drawn to forgotten places, the kind where time seemed to stop. I didn't know how literal that feeling would become. Whitlow wasn't on most maps. It took a detour down a gravel road and a rusted-out sign half buried in cornfields to even confirm I was close. When I pulled in, I noticed it right away. Something about the air felt wrong. Still, too still. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No wind, no birds, just the crunch of my tires on loose gravel. Then something stranger, no one was wearing a watch, and every public clock was either removed or frozen on the same time. 3:17. It wasn't just a coincidence. At the diner, a retro spot with peeling leather booths and dusty jukeboxes, I asked the waitress about it. Her name was June. She had this nervous energy, like she was always waiting for something to happen. "Clocks stopped mattering here a long time ago," she said, without making eye contact. Then she added, quietly, "It's better not to know what time it is, safer." I thought she was joking. But when I asked why, she froze, like I'd said something offensive. "People who try to count the hours," she started, then shook her head. "They're not the same after. Not really people no more." That was the first time I saw that look in her eyes, a mix of fear and pity. Like she already knew what was coming for me. I stayed at the only motel in town. The walls were paper thin and the hallway light buzzed with a mechanical hum that never stopped. My room had no clock. Ugh, not on the microwave. Ugh, not on the wall. Not even in the lobby. That night, I heard knocking. 3 knocks. Soft. Deliberate. I checked the peephole. No one. But when I opened the door, there was an envelope on the floor. Inside was a Polaroid. A picture of me, standing in front of my car. The photo clearly taken earlier that day. On the back, someone had written, "Don't look at the church tower after 3:17. I hadn't even noticed a church tower. But now I had to see it. The next day, I asked around about the church. People avoided the question. One old man outside the hardware store said, "Used to be First Baptist. Now it's just something else." I found it just past the cornfields. Tall white steeple, boarded windows, and a bell tower covered in vines. But there was something wrong with it. The shadow it cast didn't line up with the sun. And the longer I looked, the more I felt like the steeple was watching me. That night, I set an alarm on my phone for 3:16 a.m., just 1 minute before the forbidden's time. My phone shut off by itself at 3:15. It turned back on at 4:04, with a single new photo in the gallery. It was me again, only this time I was looking up at the tower. Eyes wide, mouth open in a scream. I had no memory of leaving my room. The next morning, the town felt colder. People looked at me differently. Some didn't blink. Some whispered under their breath as I passed. Others just stood still, motionless for far too long. I saw June again. She pulled me aside, frantic. "You looked, didn't you?" she hissed. I nodded. She started crying. "You can't leave now. It'll follow you." "What will?" I asked. But she just whispered, "It knows you saw it. You're part of its time now." That night, the clocks came back. Not in the town, just in my room, my watch, my phone, even the microwave all turned on. All flashing 3:17 a.m. The world outside had stopped moving. No wind, no sound, just the deep toll of a bell. I looked out the window, and there it was, the church tower glowing faintly under a full moon, and at the top a figure, not a person. It looked like a silhouette made of static, like something trying to exist, but failing. And then it looked at me. I remember screaming. I remember every second of 3:17 stretching like hours. I remember my skin feeling like it was unraveling. And then, nothing. I woke up in my car, outside the town. I should have felt relief, but I couldn't find the road back. It's gone from the GPS, gone from the state records. Whitlow doesn't exist anymore. And here's the worst part. No matter where I am, at exactly 3:17 a.m., every clock around me stops, and I hear it, the bell, tolling in the distance, closer each night. There's a place just outside Calder Creek, West Virginia, that the locals won't talk about. Not to strangers, not even to each other. It's not on any map. It's just referred to, if it's ever mentioned, as the Whisper Field. I didn't believe it existed until last summer. When my cousin Eli disappeared trying to find it, we grew up hearing about it. My grandfather used to say, "Don't he ever go past the fence with the broken cross, that S where the world starts to get thin." I always thought it was just superstition, local flavor, but Eli was obsessed with it. He kept journals, drew maps, connected stories from newspaper clippings about missing hikers, pets that vanished, weird radio signals, and even voices. Eli told me once that the field was alive, and that it didn't want to be found, but if you got close, it would start calling to you, whispering to you. At first, he said, it was just wind. Then it turned into words, then voices he recognized. He said he heard our mother's voice once, even though she'd been dead for 10 years. I thought he needed help. We fought about it. He kept saying he had to go one last time. He said the field had answers. That was the last time I saw him. 2 weeks later, his car was found abandoned on a dirt road outside Calder Creek, near an overgrown trail. No sign of him. The police chalked it up to another wilderness disappearance. But I found his journal under the driver's seat. The last page said, "If you hear your own voice behind you, don't turn around." I knew I had to go look. I followed his route, using the notes he left. The trail was barely there anymore, like the forest was trying to swallow it. It led me to a rusted old fence, and nailed to one of the posts was a broken wooden cross, just like Grandpa used to describe. That's when I noticed everything had gone silent. No birds, no bugs, not even wind. I crossed the fence and walked into a clearing that stretched like a bowl in the land. No buildings, just tall, pale grass swaying slightly, even though there was no breeze. Then I heard it, a whisper, just one word. "Closer." I spun around, no one. Then I heard it again, but this time, it was my voice. The field didn't feel empty. It felt full, like something massive was just under the surface, breathing. I kept hearing whispers. My mom, my dad, even Eli's voice, all calling me deeper into the field. Every time I turned to look, there was nothing. But I swear the grass would lean away from where I stood, like I was walking on a lung. I took out my phone to record. It wouldn't turn on. The battery was full. The screen just fuzzed, like static on an old TV. Then I heard footsteps, running, coming toward me fast. I held my breath, but nothing ever reached me. At the center of the field, I found something, a stone slab, half buried in the dirt, covered in carvings, symbols I didn't recognize, and scratched into it with what looked like fingernails. I made it to the middle. It never ends. Under that, in smaller letters, "Don't answer it. Don't follow it. Don't turn around." And then I heard it. A blood-curdling scream. My scream, echoing from behind me. I froze. I hadn't made a sound, but it was my voice. My exact scream. And it got closer. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. The sun didn't move. The sky stayed gray. And the air was thick with voices. My memories. My regrets. Secrets I'd never told anyone. That's when I understood. The field didn't hunt you. It became you. It peeled your soul like an onion, whispering pieces of you back until you weren't sure what was real anymore. Then, the whisper behind me said, "I found him." "Want to see?" It was Eli's voice. I broke. I turned around. Standing there was me. Not quite right. Same face. Same clothes. But his smile was too wide. His eyes too black. His shadow didn't move. He reached out and said, "Let's go home." I ran. I don't remember getting back to my car. Just the feeling of something chasing me that never made a sound. When I got home, I burned Eli's journal. I blocked off the trail on every map I could, but some nights, around 3 a.m., I wake up to whispers from my closet. My voice, and it says the same thing every time: you turned around. That means you're mine now. In 2017, I took a summer job at the public library in Belwick, Maine, a fog-choked harbor town barely clinging to life. The town had one gas station, one bar, and one library, and everyone acted like it was more important than the church. I was just 21, broke, and looking for something quiet, and Belwick seemed dead enough. The library was an old, colonial-style building, all stone and stained glass. It had a strange smell, not just old books, but something more like wet dirt. The head librarian, Mrs. Marlin, gave me a single rule during orientation: never go below the second floor, which was odd, because the building only had the visible floors. The first week went by fine, quiet, dusty. Locals came in, nodded politely, then left without speaking much. But on my 8th day, I saw something strange. A little girl, pale, barefoot, standing by a wall in the history section. She stared at me and then walked through a narrow arch I'd never noticed before. When I followed her, I found a staircase going down. Cold stone steps, steep and slick. I called after her, but she never responded. Then I heard it, not her footsteps, but whispers. They echoed from below, layered, chanting, and all of it in a language I didn't understand. I turned around. Mrs. Marlin was standing behind me, silent and pale. "You didn't go down there, did you?" she asked. "No," I lied. She didn't blink. "Good," she said. "You wouldn't come back the same." The next morning, my keycard had been deactivated. I assumed I was fired, but when I confronted Mrs. Marlin, she calmly said, "It resets if the building doesn't approve of you." That was the first time I realized something else might be running the show. I spent the next few days watching. I found patterns. Some patrons always entered between 3:33 and 3:36 p.m. Some checked out books that weren't in our system. One man signed his name in reverse every time, Lem Sirocco. Then I found the book. It was tucked behind a false panel in the nonfiction section. Thick, bound in gray leather. No title on the spine. Inside were handwritten entries, journal style, dated as far back as 1871. The entries all described the same thing: the basement library. Some entries said it showed different things to different people. Others said once you read the right page, you are allowed below. And one said, if you hear the shelves breathing, close the book immediately. I laughed. But that night, in my room, I heard something slowly inhaling from my backpack. The next time I went in, the false wall was gone, but in its place was the girl again. Standing at the top of the stairs. This time, she spoke. "The basement is ready." I should have run, but I didn't. I descended. Each step down felt colder, heavier. The air thickened. The lights above faded, and I swear the concrete began to feel warm, like it had a heartbeat. At the bottom, there were rows and rows of bookshelves, stretching further than the building should allow. Everything smelled of mildew, ink, and rot. And then I realized the books were whispering. Not just pages fluttering, actual whispers. Like each book held something alive inside it, murmuring to be let out. I opened one at random. It was my journal. Pages I hadn't written yet. Things I hadn't lived yet. And at the bottom, in fresh ink, it said, "You shouldn't have come down here." That's when the light snapped off. Not slowly, all at once, and I heard footsteps. Not one set, dozens, running, closing in. I ran too. The stairway was gone. I turned corners, passing shelves that curved in impossible directions. Some had teeth instead of books. One shelf was entirely full of jars with blinking eyes. Another had a mirror that showed me aging in real time, skin wrinkling, eyes dulling, until I crumbled to dust. I collapsed near a stone lectern, gasping, and I heard a voice, not the girl, not Mrs. Marlin. It was me. From above, from behind. Found him. My voice said, "He's ready." I don't remember escaping. But I woke up in my bed. My phone said 2 weeks had passed. I went back to the library. Mrs. Marlin was gone. The building was boarded up. Locals told me it burned down years ago, in 1998, but I was there. In 2017, I still have the key card. I still have the journal. And every night since then, at 3:36 a.m., the bookshelves whisper my name. I tried moving, changing my name, burning the journal, but it doesn't matter. I've already been cataloged. The book said it clearly. You can leave the library, but the library never leaves you. There's an old mining town in northern Colorado called Raventon. Population barely over 300. It's mostly forgotten, except for one building that still stands tall at the edge of town, the Raventon Chapel. Locals call it the Bell House, even though it hasn't held a service in over 80 years. They say the church bell still rings, but only when someone in town is about to disappear. I first heard about Raventon from my roommate Kyle during college. His uncle lived there, and when Kyle visited one summer, he came back off. He didn't sleep well, he jumped at every loud sound. And he kept drawing this strange bell tower in his notebook, over and over, with the words, "It doesn't need a ringer. It rings for who it wants." At first, I thought it was just a weird obsession, maybe trauma, but one night, Kyle woke me up around 2:30 a.m. He was shaking. He said, "The bell rang last night, and my uncle's gone." Sure enough, the next day, Kyle got a call. His uncle had vanished from his home. No sign of forced entry. His car was still there, doors locked. No footprints, nothing. Kyle never went back to Raventon. But I did. I arrived in Raventon on a gray October afternoon. The town looked like it hadn't been updated since the 50s. Rusted trucks, dusty storefronts, people who stared too long but said nothing. I checked into the only motel, run by a woman in her 80s. She didn't ask for ID, didn't ask why I was there, just handed me the key and muttered, "You shouldn't stay long." When I asked her about the church, she froze. "You see it," she said slowly, "but you don't look at it. You hear it, but you don't listen." Then she handed me a Bible with several pages blacked out in Sharpie. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3:12 a.m., I heard it. Bong. One. Deep, echoing bell tone. No wind, no birds, just that sound. It came from the church, half a mile away. No one pulled the rope. The bell tower was visibly empty. The next morning, a local teen was reported missing. His bike was found leaning against the grocery store. I started asking around. Eventually, a man in his 60s, who worked at the gas station, gave me this warning. There are 3 rules in Raventon. 1. When the bell rings, you stay inside. 2. If it rings more than once, someone's already gone. 3. If you ever hear it call your name, you run, and you don't stop until you forget this place ever existed. The following evening, I broke Rule 1. I stood in the empty street at 3 a.m., waiting. 3:11. Silence. 3:12. Bong. Then a second ring. Bong. I should have run, but instead, I walked toward the church. The door wasn't locked. The air inside was ice cold. Candles lit themselves as I walked through the aisle. There was no dust, no cobwebs, just silence. And then I saw it, a figure, dressed in a black, old-fashioned preacher's robe, standing under the bell tower, face hidden in shadow. I asked, "Why is the bell ringing?" The figure turned its head slowly. "You heard it," it whispered. "That means it heard you, too." I tried to leave the church, but the door wouldn't budge. The figure kept talking. "The bell is older than the town. Older than you. Older than death. This chapel was built around it, not the other way. Every town needs a way to purge what it fears. Raventon feeds it people, one at a time." I started backing away, heart racing. I pulled out my phone. The screen glitched and went black. Then I heard my name. Not from the figure, from the bell itself. A low, grinding screech that formed into 2 syllables. Jacob, I don't remember how I got back to the motel. But when I woke up, my clothes were muddy and torn. My shoes were gone, and someone had carved a small bell symbol into the wood above my bed. I left that morning, never looked back. But here's the thing. Every few weeks since then, I hear a bell ring. Always around 3:12 a.m. No matter where I am, no matter how far from Raventon. It started once a month. Now it's once a week. And I swear I can feel something getting closer every time it rings. I've changed my number, burned my clothes. I even got a therapist, told him it was PTSD. He believed me. Until he called me last week at 3:15 a.m. I didn't answer. His voicemail was short. All I heard was the bell, once, then his voice. It said your name. Windermere, Vermont, population 812. Not a town most people ever hear about. Unless you're talking to someone from northern New England. Then you'll hear the stories about the lake. Windermere Lake stretches along the woods like a mirror. So still, so quiet, they say it reflects more than just your image. It reflects who you really are, or what you've been hiding. They say if you go to the lake alone, and look at your reflection during a full moon, something looks back. And sometimes it follows you home. I was 17 when I visited Windermere with my cousin Hannah. My mom sent me there for the summer, hoping I'd disconnect from the city and reconnect with nature. What she didn't know was that Windermere had a local dare among teens. Go down to the lake at midnight during a full moon, look into your reflection, and say, I see you. Show me what I hide. If nothing happened, you were safe. If something moved in the water, you were supposed to run. Fast. Of course, I thought it was all nonsense. Hannah dared me to do it. I agreed. We waited until midnight, crept through the woods, and reached the still surface of Windermere Lake. The moon was massive, glowing like a white coin in the sky. The surface of the lake looked like glass. I leaned over, stared at my reflection, and whispered, I see you. Show me what I hide. At first, nothing, just my face. Then, I swear this on my life, my reflection blinked out of sync with me. I gasped, looked away. When I looked back, my reflection smiled. But I wasn't smiling. Hannah didn't see it. She said I was imagining things. But something had changed. That night, I had the worst dreams of my life. In them, I was being watched by me, standing at the edge of the woods, just watching. Every time I turned to look, the other me was gone. Over the next week, strange things kept happening. My toothbrush would be wet before I used it. My shoes were moved to different spots. I'd find muddy footprints on the porch, the same size as mine. At first, I thought Hannah was pranking me, until she showed me something she'd found buried in a tin box behind her house. A journal, leather-bound, moldy. Inside were dozens of entries, all written by different hands, different years. Some dated back to 1934. Every entry talked about seeing a copy of themselves after visiting the lake. They called it the other. It started as a reflection, then small signs, then sightings, and then replacement. One night, I saw me again in the hallway mirror. Just a flash, but enough. I ran into the bathroom, slammed the door, and stared at my reflection. Nothing wrong at first. Then, my reflection tilted its head. Even though I didn't. I whispered, What do you want? It mouthed the words, to live. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a flashlight and waited. At 3:14 a.m., I saw him, me, same clothes, same face, walking toward the house. I ran inside, slammed the door, and told Hannah everything. She believed me. She'd seen it too, years ago, but never said the words at the lake. She'd been safe, until now. We tried to leave town the next day, packed up, jumped into Hannah's car. But the road out of Windermere closed off. Flooded by a storm that no one heard or felt. Locals just shrug. You'll leave when the lake lets you, they said. Back at the house, we locked the windows and mirrors, covered every reflective surface. That night, it knocked on the door. We didn't answer. Then it spoke, in my voice. Why are you afraid of yourself? In the journal, one page was marked with an X. It said there was a way to stop the other, but only temporarily. You had to return to the lake before dawn and sacrifice a memory. Something pure, something that mattered. If the lake accepted it, the other would fade. But if not, I took an old photo of my dad and me. He died when I was 9. It was the last real memory I had of him. I walked back to Windmere Lake in the dark, tossed the photo in. The water rippled, bubbled, then stilled. The reflection looked normal, for now. I never went back to Windmere after that summer. But every now and then, I still see it. In shadows, in glass, in puddles. A version of me that shouldn't exist. Smiling when I'm afraid, blinking when I don't, and always watching. If you ever go to Windmere Lake, don't say the words. Because once it sees you, it never stops looking. In a forgotten corner of southern Mississippi lies a tiny, crumbling town called Dry Creek. It's not on most maps anymore. It's surrounded by forest, swamp, and silence. There's no post office, no gas station, no mayor, just a scattering of decaying homes, and one building that all the locals avoid, the Lockwood House. No one knows who built it. No one remembers seeing anyone move in. But they all know the same thing. Once you go inside, something follows you out. The story starts with a kid named Elliot Granger, age 14. In 2003, he and his friends dared each other to enter the Lockwood House. Elliot went in alone. He was supposed to come back out after 10 minutes. He never did. His friends waited, then panicked. They ran home and told the sheriff. When the search team entered the house the next day, they found Elliot's flashlight just inside the doorway. Still on, batteries dead, but no sign of him. And here's where it gets strange. The interior of the house was different than it had ever been before. There were more rooms than blueprints showed. Hallways that twisted back on themselves. A staircase that led nowhere. It was like the house shifted, as if it adapted to whoever entered. They never found Elliot. In 2023, I was working as a freelance documentarian. I had heard whispers about Dry Creek and the Lockwood House online, buried deep in old forums. Some archived newspaper clippings. One Reddit post that simply read, "I spent one night in the Lockwood House. I woke up with a tooth under my skin. That was enough for me." I grabbed my camera gear and drove down. Dry Creek was even more desolate than I expected. There were only 6 houses still standing, 4 of them abandoned. An old woman pumping gas at a nearby station saw the camera in my back seat and asked, "You headed to that house?" I nodded. She said, "Don't go through the front door. That's how it gets to know you." I laughed it off. I shouldn't have. I arrived at the Lockwood House just before dusk. The air around it was heavy, like stepping into a dream you couldn't wake from. The front porch creaked like it was breathing. Against better judgment, I entered through the front door, camera on, flashlight high. Dust floated like snow in the air, but the house didn't smell like rot or decay. It smelled clean, to clean, like someone had just wiped everything down. I moved from room to room. Nothing strange at first, furniture covered in sheets, photos too faded to recognize. Then I heard the first noise, a thud, upstairs. I called out, but no response. The stairs groaned under my weight. When I reached the top, the hallway wasn't there anymore. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring at a blank wall. No hallway, just wood. When I turned around to go back down, the stairs were gone. In their place, a mirror, and in the reflection, I saw me but wrong. My eyes were closed, my mouth slightly open. My reflection was breathing slowly, rhythmically, like it was asleep. I backed away and turned left, into a hallway that hadn't been there 5 seconds earlier. Every room I entered rearranged itself when I turned my back. Doors would vanish, windows would appear in impossible places. I saw my own gear, my backpack, my water bottle, on the floor of a room I hadn't been in yet. That's when I realized something. The house wasn't haunted. The house was alive, and it had learned my name. I eventually found a small bedroom with a locked desk. I broke the drawer open and found a diary. It was dated 1997. The entries were short, fragmented, increasingly frantic. Day 1. I came in through the back. Felt like someone was watching me. Day 2. The door's gone. Hallway's longer now. Day 4. I haven't slept. Every time I close my eyes, I hear a woman whispering my name. But it's my voice. Day 7. The house doesn't want me to leave. It wants me to stay. To become it. The last page said, if you're reading this, it means you still have time. But only if you never fall asleep inside. Then the room went cold. I don't know how long I wandered that house. Hours, maybe, or minutes that felt like hours. Eventually I found a basement door. It was covered in chains, rusted but broken. Whatever had been locked down, there was no longer inside. I heard something breathing behind me. Turned, nothing. When I blinked, just once, the door to the outside hallway was gone. I sat down, overwhelmed with exhaustion. I hadn't slept in almost 30 hours. My limbs felt like lead. My eyelids drooped, and then I remembered the diary. Never fall asleep. I stood, splashed cold water on my face from an old pitcher. Stayed moving, talking to myself, slapping my face, but I still nodded off. When I woke up, I wasn't in the basement anymore. I was back in my car, outside the house. It was sunrise. Birds chirping. Normal. My gear was in the back seat. Intact. I drove away without even checking the footage. I just wanted to be far from that place. But when I finally checked my recordings a week later, the footage didn't match what I remembered. It showed me walking into rooms I never went in, looking at the camera and smiling when I know I wasn't, speaking in a calm voice, saying things I never said. I think I'll stay here a while. Then the screen cut to static. Part 8. The house isn't done now, even though I've been home for months. I've started to notice something. My apartment feels different. Rooms seem longer. Doors creak when there's no wind. Sometimes, I wake up to find furniture moved just slightly. And in the mirror, when I glance too fast, I see the reflection of the Lockwood house behind me. The house let me go, but I don't think it ever really lets anyone leave. The town of Clare Hollow, North Dakota, is barely a pinprick on a map. One main road, a gas station, a diner, a grain elevator, and one old house that everyone knows, a crumbling two-story white farmhouse at the edge of the wheat fields. Just past Route 14. Every local child knows the story. Never look into the top left window after midnight, because if you see him, he sees you too. In 2016, Alyssa Browning, a 33-year-old school teacher from Chicago, moved to Clare Hollow to escape her chaotic city life. She'd inherited the farmhouse from her late aunt, a woman she barely knew. The will came with one condition: Alyssa had to live in the house for at least 1 year. The locals weren't welcoming. They weren't rude, just hesitant. When she'd mention her address at the diner or post office, people would fall silent. Some would change the subject. Others would say things like, "Hope you're a heavy sleeper." That house ain't been kind to folks. But Alyssa was practical. She didn't believe in ghost stories. She just wanted quiet. She got more than she bargained for. On her first night in the house, Alyssa noticed something strange. The top left window, in what used to be her aunt's bedroom, faced the driveway. She kept catching glimpses of movement in the reflection of her car windshield. Just a flicker, like someone was walking past the window. But every time she looked up, nothing. She figured it was her nerves. Until 2:17 a.m., she woke with a start. No noise, no dreams, just a sudden, overwhelming sense of being watched. She got up, walked through the hallway, and turned to glance at the old bedroom. The door was open, and standing inside the room, facing the window, was the dark silhouette of a man. He didn't move, didn't turn, just stood there, as if staring out into the wheat fields. Alyssa gasped. The figure vanished. The next morning, Alyssa tried to rationalize it. Stress, shadow tricks, fatigue, but she couldn't explain what happened that afternoon. The bedroom door wouldn't close. It refused to latch, like something kept pushing it open. She tried locking it, using a chair. Nothing worked. Then, as she walked back down the stairs, her phone buzzed. A message, from her own number. "Don't block the window." He doesn't like that. She dropped the phone. That night, she left the bedroom door open, and again at exactly to 17 a.m., she woke up. The same figure, same window. But this time, the man had turned halfway, facing into the room. Still unmoving, still silent. Alyssa blinked, and he vanished again. She finally asked the local librarian, an old woman named Edith, if she knew anything about the house. Edith didn't answer, just handed her a faded manila folder from a locked drawer. Inside were newspaper clippings from the 1940s to the 1980s, reports of disappearing livestock, children sleepwalking and going missing, fires that started only in that top left room, witnesses claiming to see a man standing at the window during storms. One article stood out. From 1952, local farmer hangs himself in bedroom. Notes claim the window, "1 T let me leave." His name was Eli Marlowe. And in the photo attached to the article, Alyssa saw it, the same face she'd seen in the silhouette. Same high cheekbones, same broad shoulders, same blank stare. Alyssa decided to stop sleeping in the house. She packed a bag and stayed in her car. That night, from the edge of her property, she looked up. At 17 a.m., the light in the top left window turned on. The silhouette stood there. This time, it was looking down, directly at her. She got chills as she watched him slowly raise one arm and wave. She drove away. For 3 nights, she stayed at a motel. No visions, no dreams, but on the 4th day, she returned to grab more of her belongings. When she opened the door, the house smelled like smoke. Black marks streaked the ceiling above the stairs. The top left window had been shattered from the inside, and written across the hallway wall, in what looked like soot, were 5 words: "You made me wait longer." Alyssa called a local paranormal researcher she found online. He arrived 2 days later, bringing strange equipment, EMF detectors, and a mirror. He set the mirror in the bedroom, facing the window, and told Alyssa to wait until 17 a.m. When the time came, she and the researcher sat in the hall, watching the mirror through the doorway. At first, they saw nothing. Then, slowly, a shape appeared in the reflection. The silhouette of the man, his face turned directly toward them. But here's where it gets disturbing. The man in the mirror was smiling, grinning wide, unblinking, and in the reflection, behind the man, was a second figure, Alyssa, standing directly behind him. But she hadn't moved. She was sitting beside the researcher. Then the mirror cracked. Alyssa left the town 2 days later, broke her lease, gave up her inheritance. She moved back to Chicago and never spoke of the house again. But 3 months later, her old neighbor from Clare Hollow emailed her. "The house has been torn down, but something's wrong. At 17 every night, my security cam still lights up the field. It's like someone standing where the window used to be. We can't see them, but the shadow's still there." The town of Clare Hollow, North Dakota, is barely a pinprick on a map. One main road, a gas station, a diner, a grain elevator, and one old house that everyone knows, a crumbling two-story white farmhouse at the edge of the wheat fields. Just past Route 14. Every local child knows the story. Never look into the top left window after midnight, because if you see him, he sees you too. In 2016, Alyssa Browning, a 33-year-old school teacher from Chicago, moved to Clare Hollow to escape her chaotic city life. She'd inherited the farmhouse from her late aunt, a woman she barely knew. The will came with one condition: Alyssa had to live in the house for at least 1 year. The locals weren't welcoming, they weren't rude, just hesitant. When she'd mention her address at the diner or post office, people would fall silent. Some would change the subject. Others would say things like, "Hope you're a heavy sleeper." That house ain't been kind to folks. But Alyssa was practical. She didn't believe in ghost stories. She just wanted quiet. She got more than she bargained for. On her first night in the house, Alyssa noticed something strange. The top left window, in what used to be her aunt's bedroom, faced the driveway. She kept catching glimpses of movement in the reflection of her car windshield. Just a flicker, like someone was walking past the window. But every time she looked up, nothing. She figured it was her nerves. Until 2:17 a.m., she woke with a start. No noise, no dreams, just a sudden, overwhelming sense of being watched. She got up, walked through the hallway, and turned to glance at the old bedroom. The door was open, and standing inside the room, facing the window, was the dark silhouette of a man. He didn't move, didn't turn, just stood there, as if staring out into the wheat fields. Alyssa gasped. The figure vanished. The next morning, Alyssa tried to rationalize it. Stress, shadow tricks, fatigue, but she couldn't explain what happened that afternoon. The bedroom door wouldn't close. It refused to latch, like something kept pushing it open. She tried locking it, using a chair. Nothing worked. Then, as she walked back down the stairs, her phone buzzed. A message, from her own number. "Don't block the window. He doesn't like that." She dropped the phone. That night, she left the bedroom door open, and again at exactly 2:17 a.m., she woke up. The same figure, same window. But this time, the man had turned halfway, facing into the room. Still unmoving, still silent. Alyssa blinked, and he vanished again. She finally asked the local librarian, an old woman named Edith, if she knew anything about the house. Edith didn't answer, just handed her a faded manila folder from a locked drawer. Inside were newspaper clippings from the 1940s to the 1980s, reports of disappearing livestock, children sleepwalking and going missing, fires that started only in that top left room, witnesses claiming to see a man standing at the window during storms. One article stood out. From 1952, local farmer hangs himself in bedroom. Notes claim the window, "1 T let me leave." His name was Eli Marlowe. And in the photo attached to the article, Alyssa saw it, the same face she'd seen in the silhouette. Same high cheekbones, same broad shoulders, same blank stare. Alyssa decided to stop sleeping in the house. She packed a bag and stayed in her car. That night, from the edge of her property, she looked up. At 2:17 a.m., the light in the top left window turned on. The silhouette stood there. This time, it was looking down, directly at her. She got chills as she watched him slowly raise one arm and wave. She drove away. For 3 nights, she stayed at a motel. No visions, no dreams, but on the 4th day, she returned to grab more of her belongings. When she opened the door, the house smelled like smoke. Black marks streaked the ceiling above the stairs. The top left window had been shattered from the inside, and written across the hallway wall, in what looked like soot, were 5 words, "You made me wait longer." Alyssa called a local paranormal researcher she found online. He arrived 2 days later, bringing strange equipment, EMF detectors, and a mirror. He set the mirror in the bedroom, facing the window, and told Alyssa to wait until 2:17 a.m. When the time came, she and the researcher sat in the hall, watching the mirror through the doorway. At first, they saw nothing. Then, slowly, a shape appeared in the reflection. The silhouette of the man, his face turned directly toward them. But here's where it gets disturbing. The man in the mirror was smiling, grinning wide, unblinking, and in the reflection, behind the man, was a second figure, Alyssa, standing directly behind him. But she hadn't moved. She was sitting beside the researcher. Then the mirror cracked, Alyssa left the town 2 days later, broke her lease, gave up her inheritance. She moved back to Chicago and never spoke of the house again. But 3 months later, her old neighbor from Clare Hollow emailed her. The house has been torn down, but something's wrong. At 17 every night, my security cam still lights up the field. It's like someone standing where the window used to be. We can't see them, but the shadow's still there. Nestled deep in rural Nebraska lies the town of Gorick, with fewer than 300 residents, most of them corn farmers or retirees. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. The local diner still serves pie from scratch, and you can leave your doors unlocked at night. At least, that's what they want you to think. On the outskirts of town stands an old, abandoned farmhouse. Locals call it the Harvest House. It has no official records. It doesn't appear on deeds or tax rolls, and yet every October someone new dies there. In 2021, Rebecca Jennings, 34, returned to Gorick after 15 years away. Her mother had passed, and she came back to settle the estate. While going through her mother's things, she found a box hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the attic. Inside were a small brass key, a photo of a house, and a note that read, "Don't go back." The land remembers. At first, she didn't understand. But the photo haunted her. The house in it matched the description of the Harvest House that locals avoided. Weather-beaten wood, a sagging roof, a barn behind it with a strange painted symbol on the side. Rebecca asked around, but no one would say much. Just old folks who made the sign of the cross when she brought it up. Then a waitress whispered to her in the diner, "Your grandmother went missing in that house." Fall of '58, the same week the fields turned black, Rebecca drove out to see the Harvest House herself. The property was smothered in overgrown weeds. The cornfields around it were dry and shriveled, untouched, as if even the crops refused to grow near it. But the house, it wasn't as broken as it should have been. No graffiti, no trash, no rodents, it felt preserved. As if something was waiting, she used the brass key. It clicked, the front door opened with ease, like it had just been oiled yesterday. Inside, the air was thick and sweet. Not like decay, more like rot mixed with flowers. She stepped onto the wooden floor and felt a vibration, almost like a heartbeat pulsing up through the floorboards. In the living room was a large painting, a field of corn, rich and golden, stretching for miles. But hidden in the bottom corner, barely visible, was a face, gray-skinned, mouth open wide in a silent scream, buried in the soil. Rebecca began having dreams. In them, she saw rows of corn twisting like serpents. A shadowy figure in a wide-brimmed hat stood at the end of the rows, whispering words she couldn't understand. She woke one night in a panic, mud caked under her fingernails, dirt in her mouth. She'd locked herself in. The windows had sealed shut. Car wouldn't start. Phone died. Then came the knocking. 3 a.m. sharp. Every night, 3 knocks on the back door, the one that opened to the fields. She never saw who did it, but each time, she found a single husk of corn left on the doorstep, wrapped in old newspaper. The dates were always October 13th, different years, different names. Each paper featured an obituary, and each person had died in or near the Harvest House. On the 5th night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen, knife in hand, staring at the back door. At exactly 3 o'clock a.m., the doorknob slowly turned. But it didn't open. Instead, a voice whispered from behind the door. "The roots are deep. Rebecca, you cannot prune what you've planted." She froze. Then the voice shifted, becoming her grandmother's voice. "I warned your mother. She stayed too long. Now it's your turn to feed the fields." Rebecca opened the door. No one was there, just rows of corn swaying in a windless night. But there were footprints in the dirt, leading out toward the barn. The barn doors creaked open with a groan like a scream. Inside, Rebecca found a trapdoor beneath a rotted bale of hay. She pried it open and descended into what looked like an underground root cellar. But the walls weren't stone. They were packed soil, with faces pressed into them, like people had been buried standing up, screaming. At the far end was a circle of corn stalks tied into a human shape, a scarecrow made of real bone and hair. Carved into the dirt floor beneath it were words, "The harvest takes blood or the land dies." Rebecca tried to burn the barn. The flames rose fast, as if the building wanted to go. But something came out with the fire. A figure stepped through the smoke, tall, wrapped in burlap, had pulled low over a face made of stitched bark and corn silk. She ran, but as she reached the edge of the property, she collapsed, as if something pulled her back. That's when the ground began to shift, and hands, dozens of them, broke through the soil, grabbing, reaching. They whispered in unison, "Feed us, feed us, feed us." She screamed until her voice gave out. Then all went black. The next morning, the house was gone, burned to the ground. No body was ever found. Just a scorched circle where the living room used to be and a fresh stalk of corn, perfectly green, growing in the center of the ash. The town sheriff closed the case. Locals stopped talking, but the fields around Gorick suddenly began to grow again, stronger than ever, richer, sweeter. The diner even put up a sign, "Best harvest in 50 years." But every October 13th, someone still leaves a husk of corn on the sheriff's doorstep, wrapped in newspaper, with the next name. The mining town of Asheville, Colorado, once thrived on silver and coal. Now, it's little more than a crumbling collection of rusted-out trailers, sagging porches, and forgotten roads. Its population, 84, according to the faded welcome sign. But locals whisper there's someone else or something living beneath the town, and sometimes it speaks. Jared Willis, a 27-year-old electrical technician, took a contract job in Asheville in 2019. His company had been hired to upgrade the town's ancient radio tower originally built during World War II for military emergency broadcasts. The job was boring, long days, lonely nights. The town had no real nightlife, no cell signal, and barely functioning internet to pass time. Jared started playing with an old shortwave radio he found in the town's general store. One of those World War II relics with big dials and humming static. He figured he might catch a weather station or someone's ham radio. But at 2:33 a.m., on his first night scanning frequencies, he found something else. A voice, very faint, male, calm, repeating the same phrase, over and over. "The children are listening now. The tunnel is open. We are beneath." Static, then silence. Jared asked the locals about the frequency. Most brushed him off. A few looked visibly disturbed when he mentioned 2:33 a.m. One old man, named Curtis, sat next to him at the diner and said, "We stopped tuning radios for a reason. Son, if you hear them, they hear you." Curtis then slid a napkin toward him with a handwritten number, 462.90 MHz. "Don't ever tune that dial. Not unless you want to see the black in the stone." Jared, of course, couldn't resist. That night, at 2:33 a.m., Jared tuned the radio to 460.90 MHz. It was quiet for a few seconds. Then he heard something that didn't sound like radio. It was breathing, wet, labored. Then digging, clink, clink, clink. Then a whisper, not through the speaker, but behind him, "We are waiting." He spun around, no one there. Then the power went out. Every light, every socket, dead silence. Until the radio unplugged crackled again, and a voice rasped, "Come see." "Come down." Jared grabbed a flashlight and followed instinct. Down past the edge of town, past the overgrown cemetery, toward the old Asheville mine closed since 1972 after a collapse that killed 39 workers. The fence was broken, the entrance covered in warning signs and caution tape. But the gate was ajar. Inside the mine, the temperature dropped instantly. His flashlight flickered as he stepped over rails and gravel, ducking through half-collapsed tunnels. He followed the sound, a slow, methodical tapping echoing deeper into the shaft. Then came singing, children's voices, whispering something over and over. He strained to hear. We dig and dig, but never leave. The stone is cold, but we believe. We whisper secrets through the shale, and soon the skin begins to pale. His flashlight died. The tapping stopped. In total darkness, Jared heard footsteps, small ones, shuffling just a few feet away. He turned to run, but something reached out in the dark. It grabbed his ankle, and a voice whispered, "You shouldn't have listened." Jared woke up in daylight, lying outside the mine entrance, cold, shivering, dirt in his mouth. The time, to 33 p.m., exactly 12 hours from when the signal first played. But something was wrong. His hands were blistered, calloused, covered in stone dust, like he'd been digging. In his coat pocket, he found a small, smooth stone. Carved into it was a perfect spiral and a single word etched crudely beneath. Soon, he left town the next day, tried to forget, tried to rationalize. But at 2:33 a.m., no matter where he was, he'd hear static. Even if the radio was off, even if he was in a city, even if he was underground in a subway, static, followed by a child's voice, "We hear you now." 2 months after Jared's visit, Asheville vanished. Satellite photos show the town intact, but road crews, GPS systems, and state patrols can't locate it anymore. It's as if it fell through the map. Only one structure remains at the coordinates, the rusted radio tower, now surrounded by collapsed ground. One last transmission was picked up on 460 to 0.90 megahertz. The tunnel is full. The diggers are gone. Now the mouths in the stone must open. Since then, ham radio users around the U.S. have reported hearing Asheville's signal during the early morning hours. They call it the digger's frequency, and the rule is simple: never answer. If you made it this far, you're braver than most, so make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment if one of these stories chilled you to the bone.